I learned a lot of things in high school, but only some of it stuck. Here's what I remember from high school in 5 minutes or less, because it only takes me 5 minutes or less to actually explain it. In geometry, I learned the transitive property of equality, which basically just says,
if A and B equal each other and B and C equal each other, then therefore A equals C.
I used this a lot in high school to make fun of my friends for not understanding that some things are related to one another, and I would just be like, well, transitive property. I also learned that there's such thing as an isosceles triangle, but there's no such thing as an isosceles trapezoid. Tommy, do you remember whenever we were in 9th grade and we were in geometry together?
Yeah.
Do you remember that one time that Miss Olenius showed us a photo of a trapezoid and she was like, what do we call this? And I said, an isosceles trapezoid, and the entire class laughed, including her?
I don't, sorry.
Okay, well guess what? That happened and it has literally caused me trauma for the past 4 years, and just now I'm making a video about this experience and I'm on Google and an isosceles trapezoid is a real thing!
That's amazing.
I'm so upset! I have had trauma for 4 years! In biology, I learned 2 things. 1, the mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell. And 2, you can work really hard to make a project amazing, to make it just the best thing that you've ever done. You can put every second of your spare being into this project and you can still not get a 100. In world geography, I learned that mnemonic devices that you can use to memorize things really work. Me and my old best friend Sydney used to make up songs to study for our world geography exams, and I still remember a lot of them. Are you ready to hear one? 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. We're going on a trip in our favorite rocket ship, zooming through the desert, Thar Desert, Ganges River, Hindu Kush, Karakum Range, K2, Khyber Pass, Arabian Sea, Indian Ocean, Bay of Bengal, yeah! South Asia. Thank you. I'm sorry you had to hear that. In Spanish, I learned that salsa originated not in Latin America. No, sir. Did it originate in Spain? No, sir. It originated in New York whenever African Americans and Hispanic people were putting together the kinds of songs that they listened to, and they just came up with it, and then it became a thing. And wow, look at this culture. Wow, America. Wow, nobody gives credit. That's okay. In Algebra 2, I learned that I was really bad at algebra. But I also learned that whenever you graph a function, it can have holes in it, and those holes can be explained as fences, and cows go through those holes. And fences and holes are the same thing, so basically Algebra 2 is just about livestock. Yeah, I had a really interesting teacher. In chemistry, I learned the pH scale that describes environments and how acidic or basic they are. If an environment ranges from 0 to 6, then it's acidic. If it's 7, it's neutral, and from 8 to 14, it's basic, like me. I also learned that the right-hand side of the periodic table has all the noble gases, which basically just means that they are perfectly in balance and all of their electrons fit in these pretty little shells and it's perfect and there's no exploding or anything like that, so that's really awesome. In English 2, I read To Kill a Mockingbird, and on the first page of that book, the word seldom is used. It's also used throughout the book like a million bajillion times, to the point where I had to look up what the word seldom means, and I found out what the word seldom means. In world history, I learned that whenever Marie Antoinette was alive, they used to use guillotines. Yeah, I learned like nothing in world history. We also watched a lot of America, the History of Us, and I found out that Trump was actually a very successful business owner. And now he's president. America. In US history, I learned that Teddy Roosevelt built the Panama Canal and did it at the stake of a revolution in Panama/Colombia. In physics, I learned that there's this angle at some point and that you can calculate how far an object is going to go and also how tall it's going to reach. Yep, okay. Also, the acceleration of gravity is -9. I also learned that there's this thing called normal force, which is like an upward force that an object feels if it's on another object. That's how we can feel things. I also learned some about torque, but I'm not going to get into it. In pre-cal, I learned 2 things. 1, there's this thing called the unit circle, and 2, there's this thing called theta. In AP Lang, I learned that there's this thing called satire, which is basically just a fancy way of saying sarcasm. At one point, I didn't recognize the satire in this literature piece we read about flamingos and politicians, and I actually got a 0 on the multiple choice for that. In English literature, I learned that Frankenstein goes into the heart of darkness to see the Lord of the Flies when he travels back in time and realizes that Billy Pilgrim is in fact once again being attacked by aliens that are actually brooms. In Spanish literature, I learned that if you read way too many books, you're actually going to go crazy and eventually die. I also learned that some people are really blunt and they will literally tell you that you are terrible at writing and ask you to come after school for tutorials because you're literally that bad at writing, and then once you come, they're still going to tell you that you're sucking and that you're not improving, and then your life is going to feel like it's over. But then you're going to keep trying and keep working, and at the end of the year, you're going to have gone from an 89 to a 90, and that's all that mattered. In statistics, I learned about this thing called z-score. I also learned about this other thing called standardization. I also learned that numbers can have meaning, and also I learned that there's this thing called the normal curve, which is what most statistics look like anyway, or at least that's when they're the easiest to analyze. In government, I learned that the only goal of all politicians is to obtain power, and the only way that they can obtain power is by getting elected, and the only way they can get elected is by raising a lot of money. In economics, I learned that if you increase the price of a product, then the quantity demanded is going to go down. But it's the quantity demanded, not the actual demand. It's the quantity demanded, not the demand. And that's all I learned in high school. And in lunch, I learned how to do this.